Hi there. Hi everyone. How are you? My name is Rachel and I'm here every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time from the Seize Your Passion Facebook group. Really just thinking out loud with you guys, sharing my thoughts for the week, my lessons of the week, my growth on my week, on my journey to seize my passion. Partly in creating this movement and this community and this platform for SEOPA and what Seize Your Passion is all about and what it means to me and what I'm learning along the way. So this week, what I want to talk about is ego. So I was having a conversation at the end of last week with some close friends and family members of mine, and the conversation went to ego. And we were talking about, why certain people behave a certain way, or react a certain way under certain circumstances or in certain situations, and we're like, oh, that's ego. And then we started debating, well, do I have, one person said, well, I don't think I have an ego, and I was like, well, everyone has an ego. And then it just evolved from there, and it got me thinking. And, ego gets such a bad rap, right? When we think about ego or when we talk about ego, it's often a negative connotation, right? You say someone, oh, he has a big ego, or his ego, that's just ego. That's why he behaved a certain way, and we think about it in a negative connotation, right? Someone who's overly pompous or cocky, or just thinks about themselves or is wrapped up in their own egotistical world, right? But really, I think ego gets a bad rap, not fairly. I think ego is actually a positive thing, and here's why. When you look at the simple definition of ego, okay, it's defined as self-esteem, self-love, self-confidence, self-identity, self-worth. None of those are negative connotations to me. Those are all positive attributes that we want to have, right? As a parent, for example, the number one thing, and I think any parent will agree with me, that you want to instill in your kids and teach your kids is to have them have their own self-love and self-esteem and self-confidence. That's what you want for your kids, and that's what we want for ourselves, right? Who doesn't want to feel self-worthy and have an identity and know who they are? The problem is that when you go into a deeper definition of what ego means, in psychoanalysis and psychology, which is where it comes from, ego is defined as the mediator. Hi everyone, I see nice names. Ego is defined as the mediator between the conscious and the subconscious, or in your mind. Or put more simply, it's the mediator between your self-identity, how you perceive yourself and how you think about yourself and your self-awareness, and the mediator between that and the outside, the external world or reality. So it's basically your self-identity, how you perceive yourself, how you're self-aware, and how you operate, how you exist, how you be in the world, right? With others and in your external environment. Now, the other problem, when it gets really tricky, and I think this is the main cause of why ego gets such a bad rap and is often associated with a negative connotation instead of a positive connotation, is that the ego's job, like the way it's built, is purely to defend itself and protect itself. So if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of self-awareness or doesn't work on yourself and your self-identity, or doesn't have a great self-worth or self-esteem truly, authentically from within, then anytime you come across any situation in that external world, in your reality, that sort of points to your ego or to who you are inside and your identity and how you're identified by others and by yourself, the ego naturally takes it as a criticism and a rejection, and so it naturally goes into defense mode and protective mode to defend itself. And I think that's where the negative connotation of ego comes in, where here, this is a great example, okay? If you think of anyone in your life that you know or that you've come across in life as being the negative connotation of what ego means, right? Someone who's overly confident, cocky, obnoxious, all pompous, thinks they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, thinks they're better than everyone else. Think about it. think of one person right now and think of that person specifically, and you'll realize, and tell me if you disagree, but anyone you know who's like that, at the heart of it, they actually have zero self-esteem and zero self-worth and zero self-confidence. And that pompous act on the outside is their ego, in the negative sense, protecting itself, because they don't have true self-esteem and true self-love and true self-worth and true self-confidence. They're not truly connected with their true authentic selves, and they don't have a strong ego. They actually have a very weak ego, and so the ego's job is to protect itself and defend itself from being criticized and pointed out. So, you know, and the reason I tie this in, and I wanted to talk about this from the Seize Your Passion Facebook group, is because what I've learned so far, a big part of what I've learned, you're not 100% sure about what? Well, let me finish my point, and then I'll come back to that. So what I've learned so far about Seize Your Passion is that at the core and at the heart of what it's about really truly connecting with your true authentic self, right? And that ties into connecting with what brings you alive, what brings you joy and pleasure, what your passions are. But it also ties in very much into personal development and personal growth, which I talk about all the time, right? It's this self-awareness and really having self-love and connecting with your true authentic self and growing and learning and becoming the best version of yourself that you can be and that you want to be. And so ego, really at the heart of it, is that. It's connecting with your true authentic self. It's being comfortable in your own skin. It's having true self-esteem in a positive way, not in a negative, pompous way, but really having self-love, self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-identity, knowing who you are at the core and at the heart. And here's where it gets tricky, right? Because the ego is the mediator between the conscious and the subconscious, or between your self-identity and reality, oftentimes our fears of how others perceive us, right, and of being judged, which we all have, and that's ego, but that's the negative side of ego, take over so that the ego does its innate job of protecting itself and defending itself, and turns it around to sort of identify our own self-worth with the external perception of who we really are. So to truly have a strong ego, that they're missing self-esteem, often they're just too sure of themselves and have no humility. Absolutely. And then again, that's why ego gets such a bad rap, I think. It's when someone who doesn't truly have true self-esteem and true self-confidence and true self-love, their ego takes over and it puts on this front of being overly cocky and no humility, but really at the heart of it, there's zero self-esteem there in that person. And obviously being too egotistical and having too much of one thing and having too much ego without, you know, the humility, as you point out, is not a good thing. But that's true for anything else in any other part of us, right? If you have too much heart and not enough head, that's not going to get you very far in life. And it's certainly not going to get you very far in personal development, personal growth, and seizing your passion. If you have too much spirituality and not enough, you know, grounded, you don't have your feet in the ground, and you're living in la-la land, that's not going to get you very far either. So like anything else and like any other integral part of us, like mind, body, and soul, you have to, you know, they have to synergize, and they have to work together. So too does the ego. The ego is an integral part of us, just like the heart is and the head is and the soul is. And it too, if you have too much of it and not enough of the others, then of course that's not a good thing. And then you have no humility, and obviously that's not a positive thing. But at the heart of it and at the core, ego is really self-esteem, self-worth, self-identity, self-confidence in you know, truly connecting with your authentic self. Again, not based on other people's perceptions or standards or culture, society's perception of who you should be, and putting that on yourself, but truly connecting with your true authentic self, you know, sort of before you enter into the outside world, you know, who are you and who is your true authentic self and what is your true self-love and self-esteem, and then operating from that place, from a positive place that has humility, right? Having a strong ego actually is having, humility too, because if you have a truly strong ego, and if you do have a true self-worth and self-confidence and self-esteem from that authentic place of connecting with your true authentic self, then the defense mechanism of the ego doesn't come into play, and you'll admit, for example, that you're not great at everything, and you're not wonderful, and you make mistakes, and you're more light with yourself and with your self-awareness, because you're comfortable in your own skin, and you don't take yourself so seriously because your ego doesn't have to defend itself and protect itself. So that's really it. Oh, and another thing I wanted to point out, the other thing about ego, it gets such a bad rap, oh, don't do anything operating from ego. Well, no, that's not true. Again, there's the true authentic connecting with yourself and having true self-love and self-esteem and self-confidence. That's not a negative thing. But there's also other parts of the ego that actually are positive, and, without them, we wouldn't be able to attain our goals and seize our passion and really attain that personal growth and development that we're looking for, right? Because ego, for example, is often what drives our ambition and our drive to do something and be better at something and grow and become better at it. That's ego, and that's not a bad thing. I think that's a great thing, You don't want to have a status quo. You constantly want to be getting better and better, and that has to do with your ego, with your self-identity and your self-worth, I want to become better at something because of my ego. That's not a bad thing, I don't know why that gets a bad rap. Or ego is often what fuels our competitive edge, right? Competition is healthy. Why? Because that's ego, because that's us pushing ourselves and our own self-confidence and our own self-worth in a healthy way, in a positive way, not in an egotistical, cocky, no humility way, which is false anyway, because really someone who's behaving that way, it's the defense mechanism of the ego because they actually have zero or very low self-esteem and self-worth. So, yes, humility, but again, as long as it is framed in humility, but again, I will say that someone who truly has a strong ego in the true sense and is truly authentically has self-love and self-worth and self-confidence and self-esteem will therefore also have humility, because someone who's truly confident won't be afraid to admit that they're not good at something or they made a mistake or that they're not perfect. And humility is part of a truly strong ego. It's the people who are overly cocky, who have a false sense of self-worth and self-esteem and really have zero self-esteem, that come off as having no humility and having a big ego because it's a false ego. It's not a true, authentic, strong ego. So yes, I have a negative connotation to the term ego. I need to think about this. I never thought about it as a motivator. True. Well, yeah, I was having this conversation, and that's exactly the thought process that I went through, and I was like, you know what? Ego is not a bad thing. Like, I was thinking of myself in certain situations, in a lot of situations where, I do speak up and I am aggressive and I am confident, that's ego, and that's not a bad thing, that's often one of my strengths in situations and with other people. Of course, like anyone else, I have fears of being judged, and that's the defense mechanism of the ego, taking over. Well, how will this be perceived? What will others think of me? Even failure, the fear of failure, which is, I think, our number one fear, is all ego. Because what is that? Fear of failure is really, what does failure even mean? It's how reality, or what others define as, what does that mean, failing? Really, if you have a strong ego, there's no such thing as failure, because we're constantly learning and growing. And if you have true self-worth and true self-esteem and true self-confidence and a truly strong ego, then again, there's no problem with failing, because it's not even failing, it's just part of the process and part of growing and learning and becoming better. And it's part of having humility versus, someone who has a false sense of self-esteem. On the other side of failure, there is nothing. Yeah, that's a different conversation, but that definitely ties in. That's exactly my point. Why has ego gotten a bad rap? I don't know. I think because, again, the defense mechanism of the ego protecting itself, and people who actually aren't authentically connected with themselves and don't have a true self-worth and a true, authentic connection with their self-love and their self-worth and their self-confidence and their self-esteem, the ego steps in to defend itself and protect itself, and so it's gotten this negative connotation because it's a false presentation of what truly a strong ego means. But again, that's exactly why I wanted to talk about this, because I don't think it should have such a bad rap. I think ego is a positive. You know what? It's not even a positive or negative. It just is. It's a part of us, just like our mind, our body, our heart, our soul, are integral part of us and what makes us who we are, and connecting with our true authentic selves, and us tapping into all those parts of ourselves. The ego is a major component, and not talked about often enough as part of those components in our journey to seize our passion and achieve personal growth and development. And if it is talked about, again, it's given such a bad rap, and it shouldn't. I don't think it should. I think ego often is, again, fuels our drive, fuels our ambition, fuels our passion to be better and achieve our dreams and achieve our goals and become our best selves. And really at the heart of it, the simple definition is ego is simply having self-esteem, self-love, and self-confidence. And that's definitely not a bad thing. That's a positive connotation. So I just wanted to bring that to the forefront and talk about that this week, because it really got me thinking about why ego gets such a bad rap, and I don't think it should. I think ego is good in the right way, obviously, and it has to be authentic, right? And that's, again, what Seize Your Passion is about, is really truly connecting with your authentic self and really figuring out who you are at your core, your self-identity. And a big part of that is your ego, your self-esteem, your self-worth, your self-identity, and your self-confidence. So that's it. So ego, not necessarily a bad thing at all. Tap into it. Be self-aware. That's what it's about, I think, is just really self-awareness, and that's how we grow and learn, and figure out, why we're here and who we're meant to be and become. Thank you. All right, guys. I love all the familiar names. Have a great rest of the weekend. Seize your passion. Connect with your true authentic self, whether that means, go do something that you love that just brings you alive and brings you pleasure. I'm on the beach this weekend, which always brings me alive and brings me pleasure. Or whether it's, creating a whole business like I'm doing, or something big, something small, whatever feels true to you. And love all the comments. Thanks, guys. Seize your passion. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next Friday. Ciao. Bye.